I continue to think the next major bid is professional money moving into crypto. And I don't know when retail will come back in the sort of force it used to. I suspect you won't see a retail-led Bitcoin rally in the future. I think you'll see professional money driving the Bitcoin rally. What that means, for what it's worth, is we're more likely to get sort of a grindy up than a parabolic up, which is what you see. Retail money is faster moving than professional money. Professional money sort of levers in over time, over time, over time. And that leads to what we've seen, which is like a slow progression upwards. Yeah, I don't know. I think crypto, it's mature enough that maybe, at least for Bitcoin, retail is broadly in or not in. And the next phase shift is really this professional money showing up.
Is that, I guess, would that be the power law theory type of thing? I know Giovanni's talked about that for a number of years. Okay, so yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, like, is it the demographic shift? I feel like it feels like to me. Okay, you know, first off, where do you know how much? Can retail even make it pop again? Do you know off the top of your head, you know, what we're looking at even for retail, you know, what people might have available? I don't know, again, if it'd be a liquid cash or cash available or, you know, money market account type of stuff, or maybe, you know, people have to sell assets to jump in. Do you have any type of, you know, inkling of?
It's a great question. Yeah, there's a huge amount of money in money market funds. So it's worth noting that something like $7 trillion. So there's plenty of firepower in money market funds that could move in and lift this market. The thing that makes it different maybe from versions past is that money tends to be owned by wealthier, older investors, right? There is a skew of the distribution of money market funds versus sort of retail checking accounts, sort of stimmy-led retail purchases. And I do think I don't have a good way of gauging how much cash there is left in that system. But if you look at various economic indicators, there's a fair amount of stress in the lower end of the retail side of our economy right now. There are high auto default rates. There's high credit card levels. So there may be some distress there. There's a huge amount of retail money evidenced by money market funds that's on the sidelines waiting for an asset exposure to come in. And I do think it will come in. One thing to think about is as interest rates come down over time, holding those money market funds becomes less attractive, and that can force that money into other assets. So I think we could see an element of that if we see an interest rate decline in the next handful of months.
So I wrote down like 3 different questions while you were speaking right there that kind of spurred off of that. What the first one, I think maybe will be easiest since you just mentioned it. Where do you think rates go? Because we were showing this chart earlier, obviously, that we've been looking at for years. And then in saying that, I thought, what was this? It was 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember now when the rates, you know, when the rates spiked up and we're the most aggressive rate climb we've seen, at least in modern times. And I know me and a lot of people, it was just like, well, this can't last very long. I mean, maybe 6 months, you know, a month or a year and most. And then here we are like a couple of years later and we're still just chugging along. I mean, it's mind blowing to me. I mean, where do you think, you know, and everyone, it's always like, well, we can't we talked about the 38 trillion in debt already. You can't, you know, refinance all this debt with 5% interest rates or 4% or 7% or whatever. Where do you see rates going? I mean, like, it just feels like we're, you know, Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. It's like we like ran off the cliff and we're just like, we haven't looked down yet. Nothing makes sense.
I think it's a good analogy. I mean, my honest sense, I don't know if it makes sense or not for the economy, but my honest sense is I think rates are going to go substantially lower over the next year. The reason for that is, Trump is remaking the Fed in his image. He objectively wants lower rates. You may think that's a good idea. You may think it's a bad idea. You may think politics should stay out of the Fed. You may think the Fed should be responsive to the executive. It doesn't matter. What matters is that that's what's happening, and that they're putting Stephen Miller on the Fed and they're reconsidering the Fed governorship. And Trump is very active about saying he wants substantially lower interest rates. And so I think I would expect that to happen. Again, it doesn't matter if you want it to happen or not. But I do think that's what's going to happen over the next years. Those interest rates are going to come substantially down. I think they're inclined to run the economy hotter than otherwise. We've seen those statements from the Fed about whether they're balancing inflation versus employment. and emphasizing sort of the employment side of the spectrum, these are all signals that rates are going to come down, and probably inflation is going to stay a lot closer to the 3% level and maybe above. And that's just stated CPI. That's
Yeah, I
not
was gonna
real
say that's
underlying.
just jeez.
Completely.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
But again, whether you want this to be true or not, I think every indication on the surface says it is going to be true. So the position in your portfolio, you should think about, how should I position for that world where inflation is running hotter than maybe the market thinks, and rates are lower than the market thinks, and debt printing is still very high. That is the world that I sort of see in the statements we're seeing out of the administration, out of the Fed, out of various governors, et cetera.
It's just wild. I'm stunned that they've been able to kick the can for a few years like this with, elevated, 10-year, just everything, I guess, the Fed funds, the 10-year, everything just being, and then that's where it feels so backwards. And again, I know like there's exceptions to the rule. I mean, rules or records are meant to be broken. Maybe that's the best way to say it. But it's like whenever there's an inverted yield curve, we're going to have this, recession or crash, which I guess a lot of people argue like, well, we have had a recession, or we are in a recession, yada, yada, yada. So I get that, but it is wild they've been able to kick the can and just seemingly not a lot is broken other than, like you said, I mean, maybe just nothing's broken other than the bottom 40-50% of the country is just starting to really struggle. So if you don't care about that, then hey, nothing's broken and great.
Then it's totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah, then it's totally fine. I mean, sure. In saying that, what kind of data, or what are you seeing just with the, it's somewhat off topic a little bit, but the auto loan defaults and just what's going on there? Do you have any kind of knowledge into that?
No, we don't have any special insights to that. I just see the same reporting as everyone else.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that, the early indicators of economic weakness for people at the bottom half of the spectrum, whether that's private loan defaults or credit card rates or credit card levels or automobile defaults, have been rising. Part of the automobile story, of course, is that car prices are up substantially. I think the average car is now $50,000, which is a big chunk for many people. Yeah. But you have to see that and think, there is some pain in a huge part of the economy, and I think that's just objectively true. I don't think that's a unique insight from my point.
So going back to one of us said the word demographics, a few minutes ago, but it feels like to me that's where we started kind of venturing on this path a little bit, and there, the 7 trillion in money market accounts, and it skews, older, obviously. It feels like to me that we're in this like 10 to 20 year window of this wealth transfer. Maybe the younger generation's needing, I mean, you already seen it in the last 5-10 years of, hey, I can't afford a house, so my mom and dad are co-signing with me, whatever is happening, that's a wealth transfer, in essence, or they're giving you money or whatever it is. They're that's the transfer of wealth before someone passes away, in essence. So there's a lot of that wealth, like you were saying, up top that's going to start coming down. And for me, it feels like we're 10 to 20 years where Bitcoin becomes very obvious. This digital world becomes very obvious, and it's just the way of life. But we're like in between these two worlds right now, where the money's up here, and that generation is like, well, hey, I'm good. I don't need all this stuff. And then the younger people are like, hey, we need. So is that kind of how you see it playing out? Just kind of like long term here?
I think it's a very strong long-term impact. And there's an analogy to that, which is the people running finance in America, by and large today didn't grow up natively with crypto. Mm-hmm. But in 10 years, that will be much less true. Yeah. As you know, Brandon, I come from an ETF background. ETFs were the disruptor to mutual funds. And I was in that industry for 20 years, and I saw it, which is when I first joined the industry, the people I worked with were 27 years old, and they were at junior positions at JP Morgan. And now they're running JP Morgan Asset Management. And that is just a demographic trend that takes over. The same thing is going to happen as well. The people who will be running Goldman Sachs in 10 years will be natively digital. And that just, and as you mentioned, the people controlling wealth will be natively digital. They'll be more open to crypto. They'll see it as an equal part of the financial ecosystem. So I do think that is a long-term demographic trend that is just inevitable. I mean, it's just literally inevitable, right?
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, then check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there. Bye.